Okay. So, immune system. We're jumping in. We're on this next segment. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. What is the immune system all about?
It's the protective system that keeps us from getting ill because we're always bombarded by toxins and bad stuff in the world.
And it's toxins. Bad stuff.
Bad stuff. And the immune system helps to protect us from those things.
Protection. Is it going to drive you crazy if I use safety orange on the immune system?
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good.
Okay. Protection.
I honestly have no idea how it's different from the lymph system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lymph system, immune system. They're interwoven. We're doing them both today because they are significantly related. A lot of the immune activity is happening in those lymph nodes. So we can put that up there, lymph nodes. But who else did we already meet that's connected with the immune system here?
The white blood cells.
White blood cells. Yeah. Beautiful.
Why do I want to say electrolytes?
Why do you want to say electrolytes? Let me see. So electrolytes are salts, right? Electrolytes are a handful of specific salts: calcium, potassium, iodine, magnesium are generally the ones that we worry about. And so basically they're important for the conductivity of like being able to treat our nerves like wires. Even though they're mostly juice, we have to have the right balance of electrolytes to allow the electrical pulse to skip through the neurological tissue. And then that's also kind of lower level pulsing through the rest of the area. Every cell is a battery, right? We've got a different polarization on the inside and the outside of the cells. And so there's storage of energy at that, the cell wall. And so that depends on the electrolytes as well. So of course the immune system has a lot to do with cells. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank on how to connect it more directly than that.
Well, the stronger your cells are, the more resistant you're going to be
Absolutely.
to invaders.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great point. We have different kinds of layers of immunity. Some of them are these active, like warrior little buddies we've got going on, just ready to actually run up to a illness and bad stuff and just punch them in the nose. But a lot of our immunity is also supplied by barriers.
Your skin.
Yes. The boundary is just as important as the offense and the defense.
I also want to say your nutrients, like your probiotics, your gut.
Yeah. Flora.
The flora, yeah. Friendly flora.
Flora. Probiotics. Pro. These are not professional biotics. They're just supporters. They're pro. They're not anti-life.
Right.
Yeah.
How about your overall feeling of well-being,
Hmm.
your attitude, your mental health? Those things can contribute to your immune system.
Yes. Wellness, mana, interwoven in the immune system, yes. Mutually influencing, because of course if we're feeling under attacked, we're going to do kind of a weak job mounting the sensation of wellness or empowerment. And if we're doing a weak job maintaining wellness, that's going to hit our immunity pretty quick.
Vaccinations
Mm-hmm.
help with your literal immunity to different pathogens.
Great. We'll jump into why that is a little bit today. Vaccination.
I want to say your self-care, maintaining your health and
Yeah.
keeping up with exercise and diet and sleep and just
Exactly. And all those things have an impact on how efficiently we can restore these different aspects of the missions that our individual cells are on. Let me just see if I have a picture here for that. I didn't think that I did, but if I do, I want to show it to you. Not really, no. Okay. What I really wish that I had is like a poster. Note to self, I want a poster of immune cells, specialized immune cells. Okay, so the immune system has a big job. Because let's just kind of zoom out on the whole planetary picture of what's going on here is there are a lot of resources and a lot of energy that are circulating and passing through the individual organisms that are on the planet. We are some of the reasonably big organisms. Most organisms are very small. And all of the resources are useful to many different organisms at once, and some of the organisms don't care if those resources are already in you. They'll go get it. So this is our main challenge. That we really bring the immune system in to face, because like while I wouldn't exactly support a raw perspective of like survival of the fittest per se, we do know that we have a lot of collaboration going on with a lot of kinds of creatures, and that many of us find ways to thrive inside of these mutual reciprocal cycles. But some of them are just, they're really out for themselves, and they see something and they want it, and they're just gonna go for it. So we've got to kind of deal with them. We also have toxins, as Karen pointed out. We've got some just materials. They're not cells, they're not entities, they're just molecules that when they bounce into one of our cells, they do damage. And we need to get those guys out of our way too. And other bad stuff. That pretty much covers it. I like it. Yeah, so illness, or I'm going to just expand this to pathogens. Pathogens being specifically the group of organisms that can cause us to feel ill. So that will cover bacteria, which are fairly big, viruses, which are pretty darn small, fungus, which is a bit variable. Some are a little bigger, some are surprisingly small. And then toxins. And alongside toxins, we want to include but yet distinguish waste. Because very few of us are actually ever in our lifetimes going to significantly deal with a problem that is rooted in toxins proper. Toxins are poisons. Toxins are disruptors that make it impossible to send or receive our messages of health from one location or another, or that are actively just eroding, like acidifying in a super direct aggressive way. Like toxins are really bad, but we all the time are dealing with quite a lot of waste, and the volume of waste that we have to cope with can become extremely problematic. And most of us will have cycles at some point in our lives where, for whatever reason, maybe there's a life event or an exposure to something crazy or whatever, and our bodies can end up having a toxic load that's like not properly toxins. It's just too much of stuff we don't need, and it's getting in our way in our attempts to send our nutritive material and our self-nourishment around where we need it. Okay. So the immune system is dealing with this. We've got the pathogens, we've got the consequences, illnesses, we've got toxins, we've got waste, we've got bad stuff. And all this stuff we have to keep out. We're going to use a lot of barriers. So this is the skin. This is also the cell walls on the individual cells. And other barriers distributed throughout the body, where just the chance that some nasty stuff might permeate any given membrane is a bit reduced. So we do have some containment, like if you're having a lockdown and you can shut off the gym and you can shut off the kitchen, and so if stuff is inside there, the rest of the school is probably fine, you know. And then we've got our really helpful little buddies, those flora, the probiotics. You guys know the difference between prebiotics and probiotics?
No.
Okay.
Pre meaning before the.
Right. Right.
So before the stomach breaks it down, or
Mm-hmm.
what's that?
Yeah, so the prebiotics is actually what those probiotics need. The probiotics are the organisms, and the prebiotics are the kind of specialized needs that they have that maybe we wouldn't notice a difference if we didn't have quite so much of a certain kind of fiber or whatever, but that we know that specific groups, maybe we want an acidophilus to really bloom a little higher and have a stronger foothold in our system, then we want to give it what acidophilus needs, and that's prebiotics. So whatever is kind of different from our needs, that amplifies the life cycle of the probiotics or the flora is prebiotics. Yeah, so these barriers are a big deal. The flora, what they are mainly doing, honestly, that is so impressive in their place inside of our immune system, is they're competing. That just like if you don't want a bunch of little weeds growing in your garden, when all the baby seeds are coming up, you might have to be a lot more attentive to it. But once you have giant tomatoes, there's not, like, little weeds are not going to start nearly as quickly underneath the larger organisms that are taking up a lot of the resources already. And so the probiotic flora kind of collective is breaking down and utilizing our waste fast enough that the pathogens don't have enough resources to get a really solid foothold on our waste product and then begin to actually invade our tissue. So they're kind of a layer of protective, just a pre-existing population. And they're not doing us any harm. They're actually, a lot of them are doing us a lot of good. My understanding is that the vast majority of vitamin K, for instance, that we use throughout our body is a waste product of a probiotic flora strain in the gut. So sometimes they're doing things that are really extra helpful. Okay. So let's zoom in a little bit on white blood cells and vaccination. And once we have a better picture with the white blood cells, it'll be kind of easier to picture more specifically what's happening with those lymph nodes as well. Okay.
Lauren, oh sorry, maybe. So for example, what kind of organs belongs to immune system? Like
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what makes the immune system really funny is skin counts as part of the immune system. The leukocytes. Bone marrow is where we're building a lot of our blood cells. So this becomes really important. The mucous membranes in all epithelial tissue. I'll write that for you. Membranes. Epithelial tissue. So those are specialized cells that just by their nature, they just kind of leak some mucus. That's just always what they're doing. So you've got a lot of that lining the nasal cavities, the sinuses, the lining of the stomach, the lining of the vagina, a lot of the digestive chambers, mucous membranes inside the eyes. So that coating of kind of like glossy juiciness is just going to be like sticky, like flypaper. It's just going to make some of those pathogens and waste materials, dust particles, and contaminants just have no further action once they get stuck in there. And so then the mucous membranes can kind of slowly dispose of that. So that's all involved in
how about
the immune
spleen?
system.
Spleen is
Yes.
for the
The,
lymphatic system rather than immune system.
right. It is a really important piece of what's going on with the lymphatic system. Honestly, I would say my grasp on the spleen is not all that impressive just because it would be so weird to massage a spleen on purpose. But it is definitely a significant piece of the lymphatic system that helps like the overall system respond and balance. And so I would expect that to have a pretty solid
Marika showed us spleen
impact.
6 yesterday.
spleen 6. Yes.
Acupressure.
Right.
Yeah.
That it has like a contribution to that clearing mechanism and like emits some
So I think
helpful
I-
material.
I
I'd have to look up.
spleen, so I'm
Oh,
very,
yeah?
I'm very sensitive for illness.
Uh-huh.
And also, that's why I asked her. that,
Yeah. Yeah. What are you missing out on?
So it's kind of related to immune system also.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. So let's see. We've got a little time here.
Oh, I had a quick question
Yes.
about the word flora was confusing me.
Ah, yes.
And that would that apply to something like the word neutrophil or basophil or monocytes, or just like does flora mean like kind of smaller types of bacteria or like just words like that that kind of reproduce and fill up our blood cells?
Right. Right. So flora, you would be able to use pretty generally about the small
Organisms.
cells. Exactly. Yeah, a lot of them are bacterial. Do you guys have a clear idea of the difference between the bacteria and the viruses?
Yeah, well, viruses are they travel more
It depends.
It depends.
Yeah, it depends.
I guess I don't know then.
Okay. So what constitutes a bacteria is a full organism. Like it's alive. A bacteria is a little guy. So they can be actually sustaining their own lives independently, more so. Whereas a virus is basically like a clever packet of DNA. And so not that they're not alive, but they're intermediary aliveness in a way of like that the DNA is giving enough information to build some kind of protein shell of connection or whatever, but they're not really like having a whole life cycle the way that a bacteria is. They're just like grabbing material and just continuing to build their genetics, and all they really want to do is make like really long DNA, and some of that DNA is useful for them in protecting itself, but they're a lot smaller because they're kind of more like little mechanisms than like little organisms.
Less
Does that make sense?
Electrical, like circuitry in them too.
Yes.
This feels like
Not
such
that
a
they're
weird
not
line.
electric, but yeah. Anyway, a really important distinction is just the size of them. Of that, like a bacteria is pretty much not going to go through a condom, but like a bad condom, you might get a virus through.
Okay.
Like, for instance, that like the scale of them makes actually a difference in how well we can mechanically filter them.
And bacteria tends to be transferred like more, like you'll get bacteria in your bloodstream if you have like an open wound and you hit it. But no, it can also be like.
Yeah, you can have viruses traveling in the bloodstream. Like there's so many and they're so different. Like you can have specialized viruses for fluids and specialized bacteria for fluids. Oh goodness, thank you. And some that are just like hang out on a surface, and some that are about going through the air and everything. I'll just pull this down for you. Okay. So anyway. Why are you suddenly whipping around? Okay, thanks, little guy.
Cool.
Yep. So, let's see. That was a great question. Kind of boiling down like what body parts kind of count as immune system, because it is not centralized or as obvious as some of the other systems. So in the lymph nodes, we've got immune cells. They're going to be similar to the white blood cells, but locked in place. So I'm going to jump to white blood cells and tell a very weird little story. There's lots and lots of different kinds of leukocytes, but there are groups of them that have more specialized jobs. So if you have some pathogenic attackers, you basically want to rip them up. Like everything that's in your body in a way that's not supposed to be, you want to disassemble it enough that the materials can be scooped into the waste system one way or the other. So whether it's a pathogenic material from the external world, or perhaps it's a cancer cell from inside of you that is reproducing inappropriately, or even just weird little chunks of garbage that you don't need. The entire bloodstream is being patrolled by these really lovely, friendly little white blood cells. I'm going to change the color so it's not confusing. These are our white blood cells, leukocytes, okay? But there's a few different kinds of leukocytes, like big clubs for leukocytes to be in, and then they become super specific. So we've got some kinds of White blood cells are basically scouts. So they're going to be the T cells. They have a really strong influence over histamine, which is, to use the cleanest example, like in your skin, if you are kicking off an allergic reaction, it's actually histamine coming out of other nearby cells that makes like hives start to raise, or like a visible allergic reaction start to appear, okay? So the T cells are going to go around and they're going to be like, oh, I saw one. There's one in the area. And they're going to let the nearby cells know we've got a situation. There's some kind of endangerment here, okay? These guys are also accompanied by, and we might give them, I don't know, more like maybe they're more like bow and arrow kind of guys. So they're scouting, they're from a distance, they're not necessarily about going in for the kill so much by themselves. But we also have the memory T cells. And these are two different kinds. And you can think of one of them as like kind of part of the warrior guild, and one of them as more like a wizard. Okay. So the average T cell is going to live like really a few weeks, like maybe a couple months in the body, and they're going to go around. What's really wonderful about them is that they either are already fitted with sort of a lock mechanism that when they encounter these other guys, they basically can like bind with them if it's the right shape. And so an individual T cell can actually like snag some of these invaders, but they're quite specific. And so every T cell is born basically with a code already encoded of like who they're going around looking for. The memory T cells are known to have a lifespan of 20 years or beyond. Much, 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 much longer lasting. They also are carrying this code. They're not going to run in and jump on these guys, but they're going to like identify the presence of these guys. There's not enough of them to like fight this whole battle by themselves, and that's not really what they're for. But they're going to be able to carry back an alert to the rest of the immune system of like, I recognize my ancient enemy Sauron is again on the prowl, right? Okay, so then they can alert the whole system and know what to do already because they saw this before, and they're going to activate the right mechanisms. And then you've got these kind of like angel of death guys, NK cells, or natural killer cells. Literally, that's what the scientists decided to call them. I did not make this up. And these guys are just basically about the full attack. And so once one of these other cells has more or less marked that like this cell needs to go, then the natural killer cells are going to arrive. They're going to create what's called apoptosis, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. It's just a really fun way of saying we're popping the balloon on these cells. We're going to like actually just rip them open and spill their guts out into the ambient material. And so that's pretty exciting. So I like to think of these guys as like kind of the assassins. And these ones are more like the guards and the scouts. And there's still a fair amount, like if we were going to dive deep, we could create massive trees of differentiation for each of these kinds. And then there's a few other kinds that are like not so obvious how to integrate them into this picture without a long, long, long explanation. But anyway, this is kind of the core concept of white blood cells, leukocytes, have this like epic fantasy world running inside of your bloodstream all the time. That's just
What's the lifespan
this whole
of an
thing.
NK?
Not super long. A lot of the time, it'll kind of take itself down on the final exit. But you know, they don't mind duel to the death.
Legolas, Gandalf, and Gimli.
Right, right. So these guys, a lot of times the waste will kind of get handled by that, but sometimes we'll have a weird little thing go off, an allergy, where one of our T cells will get sensitized to just some random bit of stuff instead of like an actual pathogenic cell. And so they'll start doing this action, fire everybody up around them and be like, freak out guys, like send reinforcements, and it's literally like pollen. So it can go a little bit sideways, but waste mostly is not gonna like have to activate the immune system all too much. This was our pathogen. This one down here is our little cancer. Okay. So ideally, most of the time when a cell has something just go awry in the DNA or the RNA, and it's no longer able to perform its function, it can't really self-regulate, it may be getting a bit over-consumptive, they actually have a built-in mechanism that allows them to like basically wave a little white flag and be like, I'm sorry, but I have no resources, like I need to take the pill, like I have to tap out on this part of the battle. And they will actually attract natural killer cells to themselves, although they are your DNA, but it's warped too much to be useful to you anymore. So that will usually go down that way. Of course, there are cases where this DNA can be warped in such a way that it doesn't have its little white flag capacity, and that's where we see some of our most dangerous cancer prognoses, when the cells are accidentally quite good at hiding the fact that they're hijacking your resources now. Any questions on that mythological plotline?
So to summarize,
Yeah.
Your first cell, which has a shorter lifespan because it's Legolas and he's built to...
Legolas.
He
Yes.
was born into
T
the
cell.
world of archery, and he has a bow and an arrow, and the arrow says
Yeah.
you have to only...
Long distance sighting. He can see it. He's
Yes.
going to go toward it, but
But he can only attack a certain type of
yes.
invader.
It's pretty specialized. Yep.
Orcs.
Mm-hmm.
So he can only fight orcs.
He's the like
It's like a
orc
boy.
proficient Legolas.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
However, 20-year-old Gandalf
Yep.
has been alive for centuries of, not centuries,
Yeah.
decades of this at this point, and he can summarize the entire battlefield.
Yeah.
He can tell everyone else, like the hobbits or the natural killers.
Well, he's actually pretty specialized as well, but when all of the rest of the T cells from that one time that you had measles or chickenpox or whatever are dead, he's chickenpox Gandalf.
Okay, so he's still specialized, but it's
Uh-huh.
for one.
Yeah.
type of- It's because he's gained so much knowledge about one specific type.
Right, so he can relay to the rest of the system, send me more chickenpox Legolas.
Got it.
All right.
He can communicate
We got
with
that.
the rest of us. Okay. this is helping. This actually helps.
All right. Yeah.
The natural killer type, they have the broad ability to.
They have fairly broad ability, exactly, but they want a pretty specific indicator. And so they're going to get that indicator either from the T cells or from inside of the cells itself. The natural killer isn't necessarily, like, they're just going to be standing there in the mall and, like, not catch a shoplifter until somebody else is like, give that back, you know? Yeah.
In the bloodstream at all times.
Yes, all these guys are just going around and around and around. And so then when the lymph dumps back in at the subclavian, then all that material from the lymph is now subject to the leukocytes in the blood.
Okay.
Meantime, it's also passing through the lymph nodes, and it's going to meet some very similar characters, but that are specialized to hang out in the lymph nodes and are actually kind of more mechanically locked into the walls. And so they've got to have the juice has to swirl around them in order for them to make their attacks. They don't get a roll for initiative.
We don't get no. Okay, so the lymph, I'm getting lost around the subclavian lymph dump.
Uh-huh.
So when the lymph enters, where does the lymph enter at the subclavian?
So you can get a little bit of a closer image on 158. We've got the, it'll kind of direct you to where the exact vein, it's got just the vein showing on our little lymph system guy. So this is a chunk of the subclavian vein, and then you can see there's the right lymphatic duct and then the thoracic duct are both kind of dumping into this vein, but they come very close together and then just have these like little points. So basically that subclavian vein is where all this stuff gets mixed.
Oh, this is the vein.
Yes, yes, the weird little bit of just some random blue tubing stuck in the middle of that, guys.
Deer antlers doing right here. Okay, that is the vein.
That is the vein. Yeah, so you can see that thoracic duct and right lymphatic duct are the only points of contact into, and then it's one vein, and that vein empties into one location, and that location empties into the heart. Yeah. Okay. So lymph nodes have this kind of like funky activity going on. So what's going on with vaccination? Basically what we want to happen in an ideal vaccination scenario is we want to teach some wizards. This is like, vaccination is Hogwarts for your bloodstream. We are all over the place today. Right? So what we're going to do is basically, along with some questionable other like animal ingredients and mercury or whatever, like I'm not here to debate about vaccination really at all, but the theory of vaccination, beyond what you may make as your own personal risk choices, the theory is that we send in some cells that are already partly ripped up, like they're not active, they're not reproductive, they're not really going to be able to establish a stronghold in your body or produce a large amount of descendants, but there's enough of their genetic material that your body has a chance to generate a good cluster of T cells, and some of those T cells are going to work out to be memory T cells. And so depending on how long lived those memory T cells are, you should get around 20 years of immunity from those memory T cells once they're established. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have these pathogens come into you or that they're going to have no effect on you. It means that when they get in you, your body doesn't have to waste so much time wondering what to do and trying weird different stuff. It'll have a pre-existing concept of what kind of counterattack to launch. Okay?
So why do you need to get multiple vaccines over the course of a couple years?
Because sometimes those memory cells need a longer education. And especially in the cases with really rapidly evolving viruses, the sample of memory cells that you generate off of one exposure from that one springtime is going to be a little bit too specific. And so you need a kind of accumulation of more genetic information about the enemy over time in order for the memory cells to effectively extrapolate, like, oh, this one falls into the same class that I've already battled before. Spells. Exactly. It's just spells. Okay. How's everyone feeling?
Super sleepy.
Sleepy? Got some wiggles to build back up, maybe? Okay.
You're like thinking about 3-hour-long fantasy movies. For enough parts.
More. Okay.
I'm curious about something.
Yes.
You know free radical scavengers?
Okay.
How do they play into the immune system?
Yes. So much of the problem with free radicals is that they're going to cause like oxidative damage, right? And so I guess I'm thinking some of our other specialized cells, maybe it's the T cells. I'll dive down a little harder in my like more comprehensive anatomy book to find that question more thoroughly for you. Who exactly it is. But I'm thinking there's some cells that are looking out for like oxidation more specifically. Does that make sense? Okay, for now. I'll look it up.
Free radical scavengers. Like you could take a supplement that is a free radical scavenger and it's looking for that particular thing, the free radicals. And eat something like a Pac-Man, right?
Right. So just to add a few terms in here, these are on the page here, so like feel free to revisit those. But we have this idea of acquired immunity. That's the resistance that a particular disease developed by people who have acquired the disease. So if you're a carrier of those memory T cells that are specific, that's acquired immunity. Acquired immunodeficiency is a group of symptoms, so that's like the experience that you're having from the tissue of your body being attacked, that's caused by the transmission of a virus that specifically attacks the immune system. So one of our really big issues with HIV and AIDS is that they are specialized pathogens to go after T cells. So they've got a really unfair advantage in some ways in that particular battle. And so immunodeficiency is the term for the result of when you're getting those leukocytes just attacked back. Allergy, that's a hypersensitivity to the system. That's when a foreign substance that is not necessarily a pathogen is triggering an immune response. Allergy. Antigen, a substance that stimulates the immune response. So that could be something that maybe looks like an allergy or something that looks like a pathogen, such that the messages start getting passed that we need to accelerate the activity of the immune system. The blood marrow will actually start pumping out these leukocytes. The mucous membranes will start pumping out mucus. Skin might shed or change its rate of processing. Like everybody's going to kind of respond to the attack, yeah? And then the term susceptible, an individual who is capable of acquiring a particular disease. So maybe for whatever reason, their immune system is lowered in a certain way, or their like resourcing to recover is lowered in a certain way, so that they're more likely than other people to suffer from an exposure to a pathogen. So this is like if you enter a staph infected pool with an open wound, you're significantly more susceptible to develop a staph infection than people who might touch that water but don't have damaged tissue at the surface for it to lock onto. Okay, so those are some of those overview terms that are relevant and worth retaining for exam purposes. Okay, so let's close out. Get those sweeping breaths. activating. We already kind of enjoyed our lymphatic system. So check a little more deeply into the immune system specifically. I want you to feel a certain connection with those moving components, white blood cells and leukocytes. Just send them some warm blessing, appreciating all of their work and their steadiness on your behalf. Send some consciousness and love to the lymph nodes, especially if there's any area maybe in your throat or armpits that might be having any kind of tenderness. Just rest your attention wherever there might be edema or slowness. And send some sweet encouragement. Talk to some of your oldest memory T cells. We have no idea how many times these cells have already stood up for us in our defense, how many times we narrowly escaped infection just because of their diligence. So appreciate that you already have steadiness and diligence living inside you, embodied in these leukocytes. Feel that return where the many rivers of the body come back together just above the heart. And feel that heartbeat continuing and encouraging, supplying and flowing. Just a little love for the immune system. And thankfulness. And go ahead and return to the surface of your skin. The sensations of the room, and to connection with each other. Welcome back. Okay.
Thank you, Adele.
Thank you.